don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I've never been so scared in my whole life. Less about you.
No,
Previously on Traipsing through Silent Hill 2.
I was friends with Mary. We met at the hospital.
So, what about Laura? Did you find her?
Yeah, but she ran away.
Open up!
We have a single moment of considerably hostile suicide ideation today, so please be advised. Welcome back to the world of bad park jobs and worse doctors. It is I, your host, Jonathan Charles Bruce, and you are my whimsical traipsers, here on another journey through the no longer foggy but now quite dark streets of Silent Hill. Today's episode is going to be a bit on the dull side. We are basically tasked with arriving at a series of waypoints, and despite being the nightmare version of South Vale, it's not really that interesting. I'll be pointing out the occasional difference and silly moment, but it's a lot of running through a largely challengeless night while overstocking on supplies. To make matters more frustrating on my end, my frame rate kept tanking while recording, so there will be some guileless editing going on in the background. Instead of endlessly remarking on the dullness, I'm actually going to be doing my After Dungeon report for Brookhaven in today's episode. As you can see, we left the hospital much better stocked than we came into it, but that's definitely a running theme in a lot of Silent Hill games. As you could probably tell through my commentary on the Nightmare version of Brookhaven, I really don't like the level. Like, at all. It doesn't help that it's followed by this section of aggressive padding, but even on its own, the hospital is a boring back and forth slog full of samey enemy encounters that force you to either fight or take a hit to proceed. In contrast, the apartments at least gave you a general feeling of progression while still confining you into a tight space. What I mean by that is if you found the map in Neely's bar, you know you're cutting through the apartments to get to Rosewater Park. Every unlocked door, solved puzzle, and defeated enemy feels like you're one step closer to seeing Mary. With Brookhaven, you're looking for Laura because first, we're superficially worried about her, but second, she knows Mary. But she's apparently looking for Mary too. She has no idea where the fuck she is either. So, how is this going to get us any closer to the hotel if that's actually our ultimate destination? Initially, every step brought us closer to Laura, then it just took us one step towards escape. We're oddly focused on this girl who doesn't seem to like us very much and is just as lost as we are. The two major plot developments in Brookhaven are that James has a shitty memory and Maria dying. Both are relatively important moments, but neither feel like they needed the environment we had. Why Brookhaven? And that question actually cuts right to the core of my biggest issue with Brookhaven. I don't see why this had to be the second dungeon, other than it was a mental hospital and people think they're scary. James, Mary, and Laura have no connection to this place, so why bother? Making this a familiar place for James would have gone a long way in making this seem far more relevant. And really, you could have very easily tied that into his shitty memory. Like, how about as James goes through the hospital, he remembers little things about the location and is shocked or dismayed at the presence of a memory. Bit by bit, he realizes that he sought treatment for depression here, and it begins to mess up his timeline in his head. Coupled with Laura's reveal that Mary was alive a year ago, this would have had a major impact on how we, the player, interact with James, the character. See, the conversation with Laura is over and done with and bookended by the boss fight. It's very easy to lose that time gap. I mean, when confronted with it, James himself looks away for a couple of seconds before he's all, "Welp, can't be helped," and moves on. So if he doesn't fucking care, why should we? And it's not like Laura hasn't been a brat to us before, so why should we trust her at all? Since I've already discussed the flaws regarding Maria's death, there's not a whole lot more to expand on there, other than it could have taken place pretty much anywhere else and still have worked narratively. Brookhaven, as a component of the game and James's story, is largely pointless other than, as I said before, a lazy horror shorthand. Just to reiterate, mental hospitals aren't scary by the nature of being hospitals for the mentally ill. They're only scary because of the systemically sanctioned abominable treatment of some of the most vulnerable members of society. Is there anything to actually like about Brookhaven? Yes. I really like the overall themes they tried to accomplish with the levels thus far. Our first dungeon is a series of rundown apartments, literally a series of broken homes. While we know nothing of James or Mary's past outside of what the game has given us, it's easy enough to see this as largely indicative of Mary's disease destroying their home life. Most of the apartments are rundown and shitty, but a few of them, like where we picked up the gun, show signs of an impotent rage. The second level being a hospital, even one as pointless and random as Brookhaven, shows another aspect of James's relationship with Mary, as he probably would be spending large swaths of time at her side in a hospital setting. This would have worked better if we were running through Alchemilla from the first game, as that appeared to be a general hospital, but whatever. Actually, you know what would have worked much better overall? Why not have the boss fight end with a transfer, so to speak, to Alchemilla? Have Brookhaven reveal that James sought treatment there for severe depression, then go to Alchemilla where Mary sought treatment for her physical malady. Even in the first game, Silent Hill experimented with weird spatial fuckery. You could have been really mean too and have a note suggest that Mary was showing signs of progress under her original doctor, Dr. Kaufman, until he disappeared a few years ago. That would have been pretty sweet and tied in something in the first game. But, you know, I suppose running around the same rooms with a crummy makeover works too, I guess. We're gonna stop talking about Brookhaven for 1 second here. Oh, what the hell are these things? Since the name hangers was already taken, I guess we're just gonna call these things stalactites, because it's a criminally underused word. Stalactites are top-heavy arm monsters with mouths for hands. They menace, surprise surprise, congested spaces that have chain-link flooring. They attack with a black tongue that shoots up out of their hand-vagina mouths, and stabs James in the foot for a considerable chunk of damage. You can kill them with a handful of pistol rounds, but stalactites rarely occupy a space you need to traverse more than once, so there's really not a whole lot of point. I really like the design as it's much more coherent than their ceiling-gripping brethren. You can also see that its torso is vaguely feminine while a pair of tiny legs dangle above the void. The feminine aspect of the creature hints back at James's uncomfortable relationship with human sexuality. And back to Brookhaven. As much as I loathe using the patience in the way the game does, I do have to give props to the developers for creating a trinity of characters that attempt to reflect aspects of James's personality. They even do it relatively subtly, while still being obvious enough to catch by making the names all begin with the letter J. Joseph Barkin reflects James's survivor's guilt. Jack Davis is James's depression and borderline suicidal tendencies. And Joshua Lewis is James's propensity for violence. Where the idea falls apart is with that last one. James isn't cruelly violent and only engages in self-defense. I think minimizing combat instead of actively encouraging it would have been much smarter for the game to do. When James is violent, it should be extreme to emphasize that under the calm exterior, he can actually be dangerous. But I guess somebody decided that the game needed combat for some reason, so we get clunky combat. And that transitions to the final major issue I have with Brookhaven. It becomes very, very clear that the game has no idea how to genuinely be horrific. Sure, it has disturbing imagery and horror subject matter, but the game practically begs you to kill everything you encounter by showering you with ammo and giving you overpowered melee weapons. The baddies themselves spend so much time shrieking and carrying around their thunderous music cues that you can't possibly miss them even if you wanted to. See, familiarity is a major enemy of horror. You get used to things. And in the space of one cramped back and forth runaround of a level, the nurses go from disturbing to mildly irritating roadblocks. You spend so much time looking at them that any horror evaporates, no matter how misshapen you make them. And since the game does everything in its power to alert you to a monster's presence, footsteps, gurgles, the radio, music, they wanted you to ogle these things and drink in every detail until they became just another thing to put down. And when they actually try to make the monsters incomprehensibly horrific, it's way, way too far in the other direction. Once again, what the hell are the hangers supposed to be? One Traipser did suggest that they might work as Joseph, Joshua, and Jack, and that's an interesting idea that could work well if they did a better job on differentiating them. Also, the actual intent behind them is, well, we'll get to that much later on. Huh. I guess Silent Hill has the power to manifest YouTube comments in the nightmare world. Neat. I have no idea who wrote that threatening note, but they certainly hate the shit out of James. This note also suggests that there is an actual hell on top of Silent Hill's nightmare reality, so, at what point do we acknowledge that having two of those things is kind of redundant? So, right, Brookhaven. The best way to create monsters that create genuine fear is to actually make it so that seeing them is just as dangerous as not knowing where they are. For instance, the alien in Alien Isolation is a familiar monster that is rendered frightening because of how massively overpowered it is compared to Amanda Ripley, and if you know where it is, it probably can figure out where you are. The fact that 9 times out of 10, the easiest solution to Silent Hill's monsters is to just shoot them in the face is more than a bit tensionless. So that concludes the After Dungeon report for Brookhaven. May we never talk about it again until I totally need to bring it up as a counterexample of something else. I think one of the reasons my frame rate tanked so much during this recording is because I wasn't killing anything, so the map became overpopulated. I didn't catch it because I got really frustrated, but if you spend too long outside, you'll eventually see monsters pop in directly in front of and behind you. This is because the monsters here are really bad at detecting your presence and will sometimes just go wandering off. If they reach a certain point, they'll be teleported back to their spawning point. I think. It's either that, or I may have bugged my game. I can't really be sure anymore. Does Silent Hill just have a thing for huge vans? There's standing room in that thing. What kind of flowers are you delivering? Nightmare South Vale is really not that interesting. I mean, I do really like the visual aesthetic of James's flashlight cutting a swath in a void, but this segment just seems kind of phoned in. They had the opportunity to show a really fucked up world, and they just kind of didn't. I mean, they have a rain effect. Why not use that? Utilize more of the barb and razor wire that pops up only occasionally. Make more cave-ins instead of big construction tarps. Show more abandoned and overturned vehicles in the middle of the street rather than on sidewalks. Of course, that could also just be the result of Silent Hill's incompetent drivers, so maybe that last suggestion isn't so much scary. So this is probably one of the more legitimately creepy parts about this whole exercise, the wall blocking our way out. I mean, there were a handful of ways that it could have been handled better, and it's not like James couldn't just step over the garbage at the end of the road there, but whatever. I think it's cool. So, the oh-so-important letter is a bit gibberishy, but whoever wrote it tells us to go to the Historical Society. They also suggest that they've seen the antagonist and fled, so, Okay, I have to ask, are these notes actually left by real people or not? Because, unless, say, James was a patient at Brookhaven, which the game doesn't tell us so we can't conclude reasonably, how would the director know us? And if it's a figment of James's delusion, what is real and what isn't? Eddie? Angela? Laura? Are any of them real? But if whatever goblin is leaving notes happens to be just Silent Hill, or James's fevered imagination being a dick, why the runaround? It clearly has an end goal in mind, so why jerk us around? I'm guessing the answer is because video game, and as always, that's a shitty rationale. Oh look, the corpse hasn't moved or been eaten or anything that could possibly be horrific. Gosh, it's almost like they just reused the same map with very little aesthetic differences. So the lock is broken. The lock. On the ground. Right there. That is not attached to the fence. So we have to go find the statue of Jennifer Carroll. Said monument actually had its head and was erected in memory of her persecution by the Christians. I think it's an implied connection to the cult from the first game, so that's nice. Oh, for fuck's sake. He found the wrench on the Lindsay Street. Okay. So, we already had the Historical Society underlined on our map. The last note from Joseph Barkin told us to go to the Praying Woman. The letter on the porch told us nothing of significant value and didn't even give us context for the wrench. So, we needed a note to find the wrench to unlock the key, all while offering us nothing in the way of legitimate plot development. I think there's a word for that. So, Silent Hill 2 is easily the worst of the three thus traipsed games in creating obstacles for James. You see stupid, easily bypassable shit like this blocking progress, and, on top of waist-high caution tape and fences, James is just too polite to sneak on through. The worst part? He circumnavigated an obstacle just like this at the beginning of the game! So yeah, I really hope you're beginning to get an understanding of why I'm so defensive over Travis, because really, if you're holding this up as the pinnacle of the game series, you're overlooking some fairly obnoxious things you're taking other games to task for. Yup, that wide open gate has a broken lock on it now. Silent Hill. You can go to the bowling alley if you like, but if you picked up the singular item in there earlier, like I did, it's pointless other than they forgot to get rid of the music from the goofy cutscene. Huh, that guy hasn't moved. He must be dead tired. Wow. Silent Hill's Historical Society fucking sucks. Oh, wow. That's our antagonist. And hey, remember all the way back in Origins when that cultural thief of a costume designer mentioned that the butcher looks like the executioner? He was actually referring to this. At least I think he was. He was researching the town and cult after all. You know, on top of all that strenuous non-research regarding Native American iconography. You can also see the cages the hangers were in, so they were supposed to be similar to gibbet cages. Interesting. The obsidian goblet is the next trinket needed to get a secret ending. That doesn't seem like it should be there. I'm pretty sure we're well under the lake by now. Huh. So, prisoner log. That's a thing. Well, it looks like the nurses have been replaced by taffy men again, so these enemies are designed to look like they're restrained. Combined with the prisoner roster, does that seem a little, foreboding? Wait a minute, that prisoner roster had the date of 1820. The Civil War was between 1861 and 65. Which is it, game? Which is it? Death by skewering or strangulation, huh? That's pretty goddamn sadistic, shitty people of Silent Hill. Also, you can kinda clearly see that the twisted forms are of speared taffy men. Poor little guys. And yeah, that totally looks like a creepy cult ceremony. And they're wearing the KKK's finest robes to the big gala. God, this town fucking sucks. Oh, that is a large hole in the ground. And, I mean, you're free to run back to South Vale if you want, but there's nothing to be gained by doing that. So, welp. On the next episode of Traipsing Through Silent Hill 2.
Killing a person
person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head